Hi Year 7s, hope you're well. Here's just another video just to go through one of the videos on Hegarty and some of the questions that were on there. Thank you very much for people that are sending in sort of questions that they're not sure on. It's hopefully a sort of semi useful way of me actually, rather than being in lesson and being able to help, hopefully sort of answering some of your questions via video. So please keep them coming. Now, this 181 task, this is basically looking at solving a two-step equation where x is on the denominator. So in this example here, we have x over 3 equals 7. Now this is one of our kind of more simpler questions because we have x here, which is actually on the numerator. So if we go back to the start, I had two kind of rules. Plus and minus, I said, were opposites, and times and divide were opposite. So let's look at what's happening here. We started with x, we divided that by 3, and then that became 7. Now, with the balance method, we're going to keep exactly the same thing on both sides. So we're going to do the same thing to this side that we do to this side. So if I have x divided by 3, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, the opposite, so I'm going to do the inverse operation. Multiplication is opposite to divide. So if I'm doing x divided by 3, I'm going to then times by 3 to get x on its own. So I'm going to do the opposite. If it's divided by 3, I'm going to times by 3, and that's going to leave me with x. And then on this side, it's going to leave me with 21. Okay. Now, when we have x on the denominator, it looks a little bit more tricky, but actually we're just going to use the same method, but we're going to use a few more steps. So, main thing, we're going to do exactly the same thing to both sides using the balance method. So I'm going to draw these lines in. And here we have x minus 2 on this side at the bottom. So this is the denominator. So this looks a bit more complicated, but actually what we're going to do, we're just going to move this across to this side. And the way we're going to do that, just like up here where I've had the 3 and I want to get rid of that 3. So I multiplied by 3 because it was x divided by 3. I did the opposite, so I did times by 3. Here it's 10 divided by x minus 2. Now if I have anything on the bottom where it's a divide, what I can do to get rid of that, I can multiply it. So I'm going to actually times by, I'm going to put it in brackets, x minus 2. So I'm going to times this side by x minus 2. Therefore I'm going to do x minus 2, and I'm going to times that on this side as well. Now, if I times 10 divided by x minus 2 times by x minus 2, because it's the opposite, I'm going to be left with 10 here. So I'm going to be left with 10 equals 6 times by x minus 2. Now, we know that we don't need this times sign, so I'm just going to rewrite that as 6x minus 2. Okay. So if I have 10 equals 6x minus 2, now I've got 6 times by x minus 2. So I can almost start again here and think, how do I get the x on its own? Now, just like we were doing when we had the two-step linear equations, I'm going to get rid of what's on this outside of the bracket by doing the opposite. If it's 6 times by x minus 2, I'm going to divide it. So I'm going to do, again, these lines here. And I'm going to divide each side by 6 because I've got times by 6 here. So I'm going to do the opposite, which is divide by 6. So I'm going to do divide by 6. Clearly 10 doesn't divide by 6 nicely, so I'm going to leave this as a fraction. It's going to be 10 divided by 6 equals x minus 2. Now we're getting there. We've done 2 steps, but we still don't have x on its own. So we're just going to do one more step. X minus 2, we want to get x on its own. So if I've got x minus 2, I want to get x on its own. The opposite to minus is a plus. So I'm going to do the same to both sides. And I'm going to do plus 2 here. So I'm going to do plus 2. That's going to give me x on this side. And it's going to be 2 plus 10 over 6. Okay, so it's 2 plus 10 over 6. At this point, this just becomes some fraction work. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do x equals 2 plus 10 over 6. If I write this as an improper fraction, 2 times by 6 will become 12. Add that to the 10. It's going to be 22 over 6, and I can simplify that down to 11 over 3. Okay. Alternatively, what I could have written that as, I could have written it as 3 2/3, but you can see that this is kind of fraction work once we get to this stage, because we've actually got x on its own here once we've got 2 plus 10 over 6. Okay. So the key to this is thinking, okay, if we have a question which has x on the denominator, or x minus something or plus something, what we're going to do, we're going to multiply that, because it's 10 divided by x minus 2. We're going to multiply by whatever's on the bottom to then get it on this side. Once we've got it on this side, we can then start working with this. Okay, this is 6 times by x minus 2. We're going to do divide by 6 and bring it over so that we've got whatever was at the bottom there on this side on its own. Okay, you'll actually notice that what we've actually done here, we've actually flipped the x minus 2 and the 6. We've actually swapped them round. So the 6 now ends up at the bottom and the x minus 2 ends up on this side, because what we've done, we've times to get the x minus 2 over here, and then we've divided by the 6 to bring the 6 underneath here. Okay, so actually those two have swapped over. So now we have the x minus 2, 10 divided by 6, and we can do the final step. Okay, so the first thing, whenever we see the x as the denominator, what we're going to do, we're going to take that and multiply it. Maybe use brackets. So what I did, I started working with this in brackets, so I can take that bracket and multiply to get rid of it on that side, and then I do it the same on this side, multiply by the bracket, so I have 6 times by the bracket on this side. Okay, I hope that helps. I'll probably put a picture of this working a little bit neater, just to show exactly how I've broken that down step by step. Okay, please, if you have any more questions, keep posting them and I'll keep going through them. This was a little bit of support for the task 181 on Hegarty.